Since 2015, Jared Stillman has rocked Nashville sports.
That team freaking stinks.
And now he's back. The takes are hotter than ever.
I mean, let's be honest, he just can't coach.
Welcome to Stillman and Company.
Stillman and Company on the 440 Sports Network is presented by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. We are on YouTube at Stillman & Co. Like and subscribe. And let me tell you, today, I've got a lot of feelings all kind of bottled up here at one time, and I'll explain why. Because tonight, we are going to be taping a little special show that will probably be integrated and will probably be the main focus of, if I had to guess, Friday's show, which we're very excited about, but I don't want to give that away. So we're setting all of that up. So I was doing that today. And then I was getting prepared for the show today. And I'm not going to lie to you. Some days I wake up and I'm like, what the hell are we going to talk about today? Now, when I was on the radio, there was a lot more days like that because it was 4 hours to fill, as opposed to 1 hour where I kind of give you the best takes and then I go ahead and get out of there. But today was one of those days where, as I was putting the grid together, it's like, wow, I want to hit on this topic. I want to hit on that topic. I want to hit on this topic. And so we are absolutely loaded from start to finish. And yes, we will cover the news that came out yesterday that Nick Saban, of all people, is now an owner of the Nashville Predators. And I would love to know how much money Nick Saban had to put up in order to be an owner of the Nashville Predators. And I'm here to tell you, we're never going to get that figured out. But I want to start off the top with Adam Schefter, who was on 104.5 on with Blaine Bishop and Zach Lyons yesterday. And he was talking about what he knows, what he's heard about the coaching search as far as the Titans are concerned. Here was Schefty yesterday on 104.5 The Zone.
How much do you think the prior relationships that Mike Borgonzi and Chad Brinker have had will factor into the head coach hiring process?
Of course, they factor into everything that everybody does in every line of work. Like the people you know, the people you trust, the people you believe in, the people you talk to. So, of course, that's a part of it. That's definitely a part of it. Do I think Matt Nagy would be a candidate? I'd be surprised if he weren't, right? So it's just part of it. To me, it's just natural. Everybody leans on who they know and like.
Traditionally, we know teams like to move away from what didn't work when they go from head coach to head coach. In that sense, do you get that feeling from the Titans that they're likely not to go with the first-time head coach who's also a first-time play caller, or is the search wide open?
Well, I think it could be both. I think you could have both things be true. I think that it is wide open, but I think in a perfect world, they'd like to get somebody that has some experience, that's done it before, that understands how the business works and what the chair is like when you have a head coach's chair. So now maybe they'll meet somebody that just blows them away, that's never been a head coach. That's certainly possible. But I think their fallback position would be to fall back to somebody that they know has done the job before and understands everything that it takes.
Okay, so let's unpack those two things from Schefty right there. The first thing was just, I think, a generic, yes, of course, the relationships with Brinker and Borgonzi do matter because they matter in every line of work, in every business, and there's no doubt about that. I mean, relationships aren't everything, but for the most part, 95% of the time, relationships matter. You want to hire a coach, usually there's a relationship there, or there's a connection there, or somebody made an endorsement there. And that can be for anything. That can be working at your local Radio Shack or being the head coach of an NFL team. But Schefter didn't just say, oh, no, Amy is all in on Mike Borgonzi making this hire, or Amy is all in on Chad Brinker making the hire. I felt like that was more generic from Schefter. The second thing was, Schefter said, in a perfect world, the Titans want somebody with experience. And look, maybe somebody blows them away who doesn't have experience, but they want somebody who's got experience. That felt like something that Schefter was saying that he knows. Like, look, when it comes to Tennessee hiring a coach, they are going to be looking for somebody that has coaching experience. Now, again, that doesn't mean that they haven't ruled it out. Albert Breer put out a story a month ago in which he said the Titans have talked about Jesse Mentor. They've talked about Chris Shula, the two defensive coordinators for the Los Angeles teams. And I think the reality is when it comes to all these candidates, they've talked about all of them. I mean, they fired Brian Callahan 2 months ago. So they're sitting there over the last 2 months, and they've been sitting and thinking, what about this guy? What about that guy? What about this guy? What about that guy? But if you really want a coach with experience, then the reality is, I think the Titans are probably going to hire somebody who, quite frankly, has experience, because that's the big thing that Brian Callahan didn't have. Again, we know Arthur Smith. I use Arthur as the example, but we know Arthur Smith can run a football team and not look like a total jackass. Going 7-10 3 years in Atlanta with Desmond Ridder and Mariota as your quarterback is not looking like a total jackass. Winning 3 games like Brian Callahan did, that's looking like a total jackass. The Titans know they're not going to have to worry about that with an Arthur, with a McCarthy, with one of those kind of guys. And so those are the first 2 things. The third thing is when it comes to Adam Schefter. The third thing was the list of candidates. In fact, this is actually how I knew that Schefter went on 104.5, is because I saw Easton Freeze put out, Adam Schefter unveils list of potential coaching candidates for the Titans. And I was like, oh, here's what Schefter said on 104.5. Take a look.
Somebody asked me the other day for head coaching candidates. They were putting together. Dan Graziano asked me, and he's like, who are the names? I said, well, there's a lot of names, but some of the names: Chris Shula, Rams defensive coordinator; Jeff Hafley, Packers defensive coordinator; Vance Joseph, Broncos defensive coordinator; Matt Nagy, Chiefs offensive coordinator; Anthony Weaver, Dolphins defense coordinator; Joe Brady, Bills offensive coordinator; Clint Kubiak, Seahawks offensive coordinator; Nate Shieldhouse, he's an assistant with the Rams. Those are some names. I think there'll be others. If Kevin Stefanski loses his job in Cleveland, that would be one to watch. Anybody that loses their job as a current head coach would be interesting. Those are some names for you to kick around.
Okay. That to me felt like it was a generic list of names. Again, he goes on the show and it's like, Schefty, what's a list of names that you're hearing for the Titan job? And Adam Schefter's like, by the way, I texted Dan Graziano, and when it came to Dan Graziano, he asked me who they should hire, and I said, sure. I said, hey, take a look at all these guys. Again, I can do that. That's like when I see these websites like CBS Sports, and I don't know the guy that did the list of the quarterbacks for CBS Sports, but I guess he ranks the quarterbacks every week, Garrett Poller or something, and he puts this list out, and I'm like, well, who the hell's that guy that's making that list? I don't even know. I don't even know who that is. Who is that guy? But again, it's like anybody can make a list. Jared, make a list. Okay. Arthur Smith, Mike McCoy, Mike McDaniel, Mike McDonald, Ronald McDonald. I mean, whatever. So I didn't look at that. Again, I clicked the story that was like, Schefty has a list. And I'm like, okay, let's see what Schefty has to say. And I clicked the list, and it's just a bunch of guys. Like, oh, yeah, Dan Graziano texted me. So let me give you the list. Johnny, Jimmy, Stevie, Scotty, Susie, Carter, Skippy. So it doesn't feel like Schefty has any real insight on the Titans head coaching job. So let's unpack all of this. Number one, the truth about who they hire. And this goes back to the relationships that Adam Schefter was talking about, saying, I expect Matt Nagy to be a candidate because Matt Nagy has the relationship with Chad Brinker in Kansas City. We've talked a lot about Mike McCarthy, and that Mike McCarthy, of course, has the relationship with Chad Brinker from Green Bay. And we've talked a lot about the fact that Arthur Smith has the relationship with the organization. Arthur Smith, I don't think, is a real head coaching candidate for any other job out there. Maybe one of those weird jobs like Arizona, if it comes open. But I don't really think Arthur is a real candidate for any job except for this one. And that is because Arthur has the relationship. But when it comes to the relationships, I think what's more important is who is Amy actually relying on when it comes to picking the head coach? Because in Amy's tenure, they have picked 3 head coaches. And the first time, Mike Mularkey was her choice. John Robinson had nothing to do with Mike Mularkey, and it's obvious that John Robinson didn't want Mike Mularkey because John Robinson, at the first opportunity that he could, threw Mike Mularkey out of an airlock. And I know everybody says, well, he wouldn't change Robisky. It's more complicated than that. The truth is, J-Rob wanted to get rid of Mularkey, and the Robisky thing was a reflection of Mike Mularkey, who had had this issue in Buffalo when it came to being told, hey, this is going to be the defensive coaching staff that you have, like it or not. And he decided, if I ever coach again, I get to pick the coaches. So when the Titans told him that, hey, we want to demand that you change the coaches, he got all upset about it. Should Mularkey have done that? I don't know if it would have made a difference. But again, the actual hiring, that was Amy. That wasn't J-Rob. The second hire, Mike Vrabel over Matt LaFleur, that was John Robinson's choice. It is my understanding that the Titans interviewed Mike Vrabel, Matt LaFleur, and Steve Wilkes. And with all due respect to Steve Wilkes, that was their Rooney Rule interview that they had to do. And it was between Vrabel and LaFleur. And after the interviews, J-Rob, again, my understanding, J-Rob went to Amy and asked Amy, which one do you want? And she said, well, I really like LaFleur. I like Vrabel, but you tell me. And he said, I'd rather go with Vrabel. So that was John Robinson's hire, from my understanding. Now, Brian Callahan, that seemed to be like a group choice because at the time they were preaching collaboration so much. And so they had this big committee with the son-in-law and Burke Nighthill and Rand Carthon and Chad Brinker and Anthony Robinson and Amy Adams Strunk, and they all came to the decision of Callahan. But when you read between the lines, and there has been some post-Rand Carthon framing of this, but I also think just keeping up with the story the way I did in live time, I do think that Callahan was Rand Carthon's choice, that was Rand Carthon's hire, because they said, hey, when we were in the interview process, Callahan and Rand just started riffing on, and it was like 2 long-lost brothers, the way they connected about football. And that's why we knew that these guys had to go ahead and be together as GM and coach. So even though Brinker was a part of it, and Burke was a part of it, and Amy was a part of it, I really do believe that Brian Callahan was Rand Carthon's choice, which would make sense. So, when it comes to this hire, who is Amy relying on? Does Amy trust her guys when it comes to this coaching search? And she just says, hey, Chad, Mike, whatever you guys want to do, you get together, you figure it out, and then you come back to me. So that if those two sit there, and let's just say, and I have no idea how Brinker feels about McCarthy, and I have no idea how Borgonzi feels about Matt Nagy. But let's use those two, and let's say that they like them. And Brinker's like, we got to have Mike McCarthy. And Borgonzi says, we got to have Matt Nagy. And they end up talking through it, and they decide, okay, we're going to hire Matt Nagy. And they go to Amy, and they say, Matt Nagy's our guy. Does Amy just say, okay, check? Or does Amy sit there in the interviews and she hears out Mike McCarthy, and she hears out Matt Nagy, and she hears out Arthur Smith, and she hears out Chris Shula, and she hears out all these guys and says, you know, I really want Arthur. I've known Arthur for 10 years. I like Arthur. I trust Arthur. I feel in my heart like Arthur should be the coach. Then does she turn around and hire Arthur? Again, that would be her doing the Mike Mularkey thing, where she hired the guy that she was comfortable with. So I agree. I think the prior relationships do matter. And I don't think it's so much when it comes to the prior relationships. I don't think it's so much that it's like, we don't want to hire somebody we don't know because we know everybody who's smart. I think it's more so, Callahan really won us over. And it wasn't until we were around him every day, and we love him because he's such a good guy, and he tried his best. He's a man of integrity, but he's just a fucking doofus. And we know these guys that we know aren't doofuses. I think there is something to that in terms of hiring somebody they know. And so when I look at the coaching search situation, there's nothing Adam Schefter said in that interview on 104.5 that made me think, yeah, Adam Schefter told me something I didn't already know. There wasn't any insight where it's like, oh, man, Adam Schefter is hinting at Adam Schefter is letting you know. Adam Schefter knows that the Titans are already zeroing in on Johnny Joe to be the next head coach. But it makes me wonder, okay, how involved is Amy going to be in the process of this? And I'm not one to sit here and tell you that Amy shouldn't be involved at all, because Amy owns the team. And at the end of the day, if I owned the team and I knew Arthur Smith could be the head coach of the Tennessee Titans, and I knew I could win with Arthur Smith because I know Arthur Smith and I know Arthur Smith's a smart guy. If that were the case and you were trying to sell me on Big Mike McCarthy, and I think Mike McCarthy's a big old fat oaf, which I don't think. But again, if I thought that, then I could see myself saying, I don't know, man. You want me to pay this guy $30 million? Because that's what I'm going to have to pay. I'm going to have to pay $30 million to the next head coach, one way or another. So again, the three nuggets from Schefter. Number one, that relationships do matter. He thinks Matt Nagy will surely be a candidate because of that. Number two, he thinks that in a perfect world, the Titans will hire somebody who has experience. And number three, he gave a list of names that was literally just a list of names. He could have ended that conversation with Blaine and Zach and then gone on in New York, and he would have said the exact same thing when asked about who for the Giants would be a good potential coaching candidate. Well, here's the list I just sent Dan Graziano. Here's all the people. So I don't really read too much into the list as being something that, oh my God, here are the names that Adam Schefter's brought. I told you this like 3 days after Callahan got fired. And I stand by this. I still think, by the way, that Matt Nagy's going to be the next coach of the Titans. But I said 3 days after Callahan got fired, maybe 2 days after Callahan got fired, maybe the day after, I can't remember exactly, but it was right after Callahan got fired. I said I think it's going to be one of four people. I think it's going to be Matt Nagy, Mike McCarthy, Arthur Smith, or Mike McCoy. That's what I think it's going to be. Now, I would not rule out just personally Jim Schwartz, because Jim Schwartz does give me Mike Mularkey vibes from the fact that he was a head coach a while ago, but he's still in the league. He still knows the game. He's very smart. He knows what he doesn't know, and they know him and they trust him. I wouldn't rule out Jim Schwartz. But I kind of feel like the idea that the Titans are going to hire some guy that we've never really dug into, like Jeff Hafley, or the Titans are going to hire somebody with no coaching experience, like Chris Shula, I just don't feel like they're really going to go that route. So that's the first thing. First, before I get to what Amy said, or what Schefter said about Amy that I already knew, and I actually kind of want to know the backstory more of, I do need to tell you about Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, the presenting sponsor of this program. They take great care of my home. They can do the exact same for you. Hiller has been in business since 1990. They are family owned and operated with 100% satisfaction of happy you'll be, or the service is free. If a customer is not pleased with the work performed, Hiller will make it right. Learn more by visiting happyhiller.com, where they have professional, experienced, trustworthy technicians who come into your home and leave it clean and better than they found it. I know this. I use Hiller. I've never had a complaint. In all seriousness, I have never had a complaint in 7-8 years of using Hiller. I've never had one complaint. Care is their core value, where they believe that when they care about others, everybody wins, and they'll take care of the customer on every job, every time. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, proud supporters of the Nashville Predators, the Vanderbilt Commodores, and the Tennessee Volunteers. That's Hiller. Call the Happy Face Truck today. Okay. The second thing that Adam Schefter said on 104.5, he said, and I think we already knew this. I think Albert Breer came on our show 2 days after Callahan got fired and kind of told us this. Adam Schefter said that Amy Adams Strunk pulled the plug on Brian Callahan. That Chad Brinker and Mike Borgonzi did not want to fire Brian Callahan. And Amy Adams Strunk, after the Raiders game where they got their asses kicked, said, enough is enough, and pulled the plug. And because the way they want everybody to think this works, they had Brinker go out there and, frame it like it was his decision. It was his statement that was released. He was doing the press conference. But again, like Albert Breer said on our show after he got fired, Amy had a big contingency of friends at the Vegas game. Amy was embarrassed with the way they got their asses kicked. And Amy said, enough is enough. Now, I don't know how you look at that, but I can only tell you how I look at this. I think a lot of people are going to look at that and say, oh, there's Amy getting involved again. There's Amy going Leroy Jenkins on the Tennessee Titans, the way she did with J-Rob, the way she did with Vrabel, and the way she did with Callahan. And that's not really how I look at it. I don't love the idea of the owner saying, I'm putting my football people in charge and I'm going to let my football people make decisions, and then kind of pulling the rug out from the football people and saying, well, at the end of the day, I'm the owner, so I'm coming in today and saying, fire the coach, even though you're telling me not to fire the coach. I'm saying, screw you, I can't watch this guy anymore, fire him. I don't necessarily like that. And I'm not a believer that, just because I agree with her decision means that the way that she went about making the decision is necessarily what I like. But at the end of the day, the owner owns the team. That doesn't bother me, confuse me. I mean, with Callahan, it was when and not if. Callahan truthfully should have been fired the second he went to that podium after the Denver game, and he said that Chim DK, or who was it, DK or Iomanner? He said Alec Iomanner needed 2 feet in bounds in order for a catch when the elbow hit. Once he said that, he should have been fired. They were paying him millions of dollars to know the rules, and he didn't know the rules. And they were paying somebody in his headset to know the rules who apparently didn't know the rules, and that's his coaching staff. But again, that's not the part that I'm kind of fascinated by. What I'm fascinated by is why were Brinker and Borgonzi so hesitant to pull the plug on Callahan? Again, if Adam Schefter is saying they didn't want to do that, they did not want to fire the coach, I think we were looking at a coach firing after week 4 when they went to Houston and they lost 26-0, and it was like, oh shit. They went to Houston, they got their rear ends kicked. It's 26-0. We know that doesn't go well with ownership. And I think all of us were sitting there on that Monday morning bracing for impact until Kaharski around 10 o'clock tweeted, I'm hearing there's not going to be much change. And Kaharski, who has a direct line to Brinker, Kaharski was talking for weeks after that about they don't want to make a change. They think it would hurt Cam Ward's development if they were going to fire Brian Callahan, which is convenient. But you think Brian Callahan doing everything incorrectly is going to hinder Cam Ward's development less than having somebody else do things 80% incorrectly instead of 100% incorrectly? I don't buy that. Like, when they fired Ken Wisenhunt, I thought in large part they were doing that to help Mariota because Wisenhunt was going to get Mariota killed. So when they go and say, well, they didn't want to do this because of Cam Ward, I'm like, that's convenient. I'd really like to know, why did Chad Brinker and Mike Borgonzi fight to keep Callahan on as the coach when we all know that Brian Callahan cannot coach? My gut, I think they wanted Callahan to take the blame. And Callahan was getting the blame. Because up until the moment that they fired Callahan, every day was this fan base on Twitter and the YouTube chat and everybody else saying, oh, God, the coach is so bad. You can't blame anything else on anybody because the coach is so bad. When are they going to fire Callahan? Oh, God, what are they going to do? Oh, God. And the second that Callahan got fired, and I know like Easton Freeze has a stick up his ass for Mike McCoy and wants them to fire Mike McCoy. I know Kaharski hates Mike McCoy because Mike McCoy doesn't say anything. I know the fans hate Mike McCoy because Mike McCoy didn't go for it on fourth down. I get all of that, but nobody's really, truly angry at Mike McCoy. Once the season's over, Mike McCoy will be relieved of his duties in a way that is not like a real firing, but just hey, you were the interim coach. We needed you to get through the season. Thank you for getting through the season. God bless you. God bless the United States of America, and have a nice life. And we all expect that. I think he expects that. I think so. We're not really going to be mad at Mike McCoy. But people did get mad at Chad Brinker. As soon as Callahan got fired, everybody turned their attention to Brinker. Not Borgonzi, Brinker. And I think that's why Chad Brinker didn't want to fire Brian Callahan. Not because he really thought it was in the best interest of Cam Ward. Again, how is it in the best interest of Cam Ward for Brian Callahan to do the same stupid shit over and over and over and over again, as opposed to getting somebody else in here who actually has some experience coaching? How is that beneficial to Cam? It's really not. But again, I think Brinker knew if we fire Callahan, then we've got a long 2 months of losing ahead of us, and people aren't going to be mad at the interim coach. They're going to be mad at me. And I could be wrong about that when it comes to Brinker and why Brinker and Borgonzi didn't want to fire Callahan. Again, Adam Schefter said it. Albert Breer told us this. This isn't something I didn't know. That Amy was embarrassed in Vegas and said, enough's enough, fire him. But I'd really like to know, if your Amy Adams Strunk was your lieutenant begging you not to fire the coach because continuity is so important? Or was he begging you not to fire the coach because he didn't want public opinion turned against him? Floyd used to always tell me, when you're the GM, you've got two choices. You can either do your job or you can protect your job. And he said, when I was GM of the Titans, I always felt like I did my job. He's like, a lot of times I think these guys protect their jobs. If Callahan really wanted to keep, or if Brinker really wanted to keep Callahan on because he didn't want people to point the finger at him, that's protecting your job. That's not doing your job. And so, again, it's not something I didn't know. It's not something I don't think you knew. I really want to know. Like, what do we believe here? Do we believe that they didn't want to fire Callahan because, oh, no, if we do that, it'll be bad for Cam? I mean, I remember Louis Riddick going on during the summer after they drafted Cam Ward, and he was like, what they better not do is they better not fire Brian Callahan. Whatever they do, they better not fire Callahan because you're going to set this young man back if you do that. And I think a lot of fans believe that. They're like, yeah, we can't just fire this coach right away in the Cam Ward era. And I kept saying, guys, that sounds good. Like, that sounds good in June. But when you're living it in September and October, you're going to say, get this guy the fuck out of here. He's ruining everything. Because I lived it with Wisenhunt, where I watched Olivier Vernon murder Mariota's knees. And this is when we thought Mariota was the franchise. And I watched that Dolphin game with an interim coach, Dan Campbell, coming in here and just kicking the crap out of the Titans. And I'm like, get this guy out of here before he hurts Mariota anymore. So, again, when it comes to the who called for the code red, we know it was Amy. But why didn't Brinker want to do it? Why didn't Borgonzi want to do it? That I'd like to know. So that's the second thing. I promise we will get to some of your reaction on this, but I'm just so excited about today's program. I just want to go topic. Let's get to the Tua news. If I may, Tua has been benched in Miami. Rookie Quinn Ewers will start. Yesterday, Mike McDaniel was asked after their disastrous loss to the Steelers on Monday Night Football if they were considering a change at quarterback, and Mike McDaniel said everything was on the table. And usually when the head coach says everything's on the table, it means, yes, I just haven't talked to him yet. And apparently, that's what's going to happen. Tua is owed $56 million guaranteed next season. Let me just say, nobody, and I mean nobody, is going to pay Tua $56 million next year. So the Dolphins are stuck with that. And I can sit here and do what I did yesterday and say, I told you so. I told you so, Miami. I said it on my local radio show. I said it on Sirius XM across the country. I said, do not sign this guy. I don't give a shit about what the statistics of what he does against Belichick, who's senile, with his sons and buddies coaching the team. I don't care about that. Every time Tua plays somebody good, he shits his pants. That's not going to change. But when you pay him $56 million, all of a sudden, now you're going to have to pay other people less. And Miami said, no, Tua is our guy. And here's what really happened. I kept saying, I never said Miami should get rid of Tua, even though I've never liked Tua and I think Tua stinks. What I believe was they need to go the fifth-year option route with Tua, have him play through that, go through it unconcussed, win some big games, and then we'll either use the franchise tag or we'll sign you to a top-of-the-market deal. That was all I said they should do. I didn't think that the Arizona Cardinals should have extended Kyler Murray after year 3, because to me, Kyler Murray hadn't proven anything. I didn't think the Jacksonville Jags should have extended Trevor Lawrence after year 3, because to me, Trevor Lawrence still hadn't proven anything. Cincinnati extended Joe Burrow after year 3. Fine with it. Buffalo extended Josh Allen after year 3. Got it. Mahomes, year 3. Understood. But there's a big difference between what Lamar Jackson was doing in Baltimore, where he was already a league MVP. Now, Lamar wanted to get that Deshaun contract, and that kind of turned that thing into a whole debacle. But I don't understand taking these mid-level quarterbacks and just saying, okay, well, we drafted you number 1, and so we're going to go ahead and give you the contract even though you haven't proven it. I had no problem with Justin Herbert getting the contract when he got the contract, because to me, Justin Herbert had proven it. And that takes me to this. My biggest fear when it comes to Cam Ward. And look, you guys know how I feel about Cam, and I know how you guys feel about Cam. I don't think Cam's very good. I think Cam has got a lot of work to do. I think the organization has got to get about 9 things in a row correctly. They got to hit a parlay as far as hiring the right coach and the right coaching staff, and then attacking the draft and signing the right free agents. And they got to hit a 9-leg parlay in order to set Cam up to have success. But you know as well as I do that my biggest issue is I don't think Cam's very good. I don't think Cam is going to be one of the bottom of the league quarterbacks in 3 years. Like, I don't think we're going to look at Cam like Mitch Trubisky, where it's obvious. Bust. Justin Fields. Bust. Zach Wilson. Bust. I don't think it's going to be that. But I'm afraid that Cam is going to be like Tua Tagovailoa and like Kyler Murray. And that is where this guy plays decent enough that you feel committed to giving that guy a contract just to justify the fact that you took him number 1 a couple years ago. Again, I go back to the Kyler Murray thing in Arizona. They drafted Kyler Murray number 1 overall. I wouldn't have drafted Kyler Murray number 1 overall. They drafted Kyler Murray number 1 overall. I remember telling Jordan Rodgers, I'm like, I think he's going to be a bust. And they drafted Kyler number 1 overall. And through 3 years, Kyler had made it to one playoff game, and they had gotten absolutely smoked in that one playoff game. And then as the offseason approached, you remember Kyler Murray took all of the Arizona Cardinals pictures off of his Instagram. He detached from the organization on social media. He was threatening to hold out because he wanted a new contract. And I thought, why would they give Kyler a new contract? What the hell has Kyler Murray done for a new contract? Again, Joe Burrow had just played in the Super Bowl. So the second that I can extend Joe Burrow and pay him top of the market money that day, knowing that the market is only going to go up, I'm going to do that. But with Kyler Murray, Kyler hadn't proven anything. But Arizona gave him the contract. They paid him $46 million a year, top of the market money at the time. And they were like, this is our franchise quarterback. And I'm like, has he done anything to be a franchise quarterback? No. But they took him number one, and they wanted to believe in him, so they gave him the contract. Same with Tua. That's all this was. Tua, when he got his contract, could not beat playoff teams. I think the year before, in 2023, when Tua signed his contract, he beat one playoff team. He beat Dallas at home by 2 points. That was it. Every other team they played, Baltimore, Buffalo twice, Kansas City, everybody, they got beat. And I say, you can't give that guy $55, $53 million. And they did. And I think the reason they gave it to him is because they picked him and they won a little bit with him. And they were like, well, he's our guy. Pay him. And that's what I'm afraid is going to happen to Cam Ward, is that Cam Ward's going to have a little success here and there. And that every time Cam Ward has a teensy little bit of success, Titans fans and the Titans and the people that picked him will go, see. And then when it comes time to pay up, they'll do it because they'll want everybody to know that they look at Cam Ward the way Cincinnati looks at Joe Burrow. I said this when Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence each signed for $55 million. And I said, Jacksonville looks at Trevor Lawrence and they think we screwed him up with Urban Meyer. And he had a good second year, and we screwed him up with the team around him. But we've got our Joe Burrow in Trevor Lawrence. They believe that. I talked to Tony Khan. He pretty much owns the team. And when you talk to Tony Khan about Trevor Lawrence, I'm telling you, he talks about Trevor Lawrence the way that I talk about Joe Burrow. So even though all of us who are completely unbiased, when Trevor Lawrence signed his contract, we said, Trevor is not Joe Burrow. They thought he was Joe Burrow because they wanted to think that. And that's what I'm afraid will happen with Cam. Is I'm afraid Cam will do just enough, just like Kyler. He'll do just enough to be able to get a second contract. The Titans will pay him top of the market money because they will want to say, this is our guy we picked. And in the end, it'll be like Kyler Murray. It'll be like Tua. You'll win some games. You won't win any meaningful games. You won't get to conference championships. You certainly won't get to the Super Bowl. And you certainly won't be competing for the Super Bowl. That's what I believe. And I believe, just like in Arizona, where they've wasted 7 years, and just like in Miami, where they're going to waste 7 years because Tua's going to be on that team next year, I fear that with this Cam Ward experiment, who I don't think is ever going to be a top 5 quarterback in the NFL, we're going to waste 7 years. This year, can't blame Cam. Next year, he'll show a little improvement. The next year, maybe they'll make it to the playoffs as the 7th seed. And then they'll give him $62 million a year because they want to. That's just what I think is going to happen. That's my big fear. You know, it'd be one thing to go ahead with Cam and then Cam to bust out and say, hey, we tried. Or this time next year for Cam to be Drake May and to say, okay, that dude franchise quarterback. I'm good with either one of those. What I'm afraid of is I'm afraid of Cam being like Tua and Kyler, where, well, we feel pot committed. Let's just go ahead and give him the contract. You know, I've had relationships in my life where I have just been head over heels. And I just think I'm just, wow, like, this is it. This is the perfect relationship. This is who I want to be with. This is how it's going to end. This is what it's going to. And then we break up. And I'm devastated. And then after the fact, my friends are like, dude, like, we liked her, but she wasn't that much. I had one where I swear I thought I was getting married. Swear to God, I thought I was getting married. And obviously it didn't work out. And after the fact, my friends were like, oh yeah, we knew it wasn't going to work out. Oh yeah, we knew. We were skeptical. We didn't really, all of them. And I thought, how? And my friends were like, well, when you've got those love blinders on, sometimes you just can't see reality. And that's how I feel like the Titans are going to be with Cam Ward. I think that's what Miami was with Tua. I think that's what Arizona was with Kyler. I think that's what Jacksonville was with Trevor. Now, it may work out for Jacksonville, but I never thought that Trevor was Joe Burrow from what he was doing in the NFL. And that's what I worry about with Cam. All right, let's get to some of your reaction, and then we got to get to the Vrabel story. Holy crap, with Vrabel. We'll get to that in just a second. Let's get to some of the reaction. Distinguished gentlemen, I love you. But when you say things like Cam is going to be a top 5 quarterback in the NFL, let me just ask you, what is the line of demarcation on this? Because Kaharski, a couple of weeks ago, when he and I did the football show together, Kaharski was like, well, he's never going to be Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow, but maybe he can be a top 15 quarterback in the NFL. I'm like, that's not good enough for the number 1 pick. So if you think he's going to be top 5, if you think he's going to be top 5, then you should have drafted him number 1. If you think he's Mahomes, then you should have drafted him number 1. How long do I have to wait until you will say, okay, he's not top 5, he's not going to be that? Because I think by this time next year, we'll know if he's going to eventually be a top 5 quarterback. Like Justin Herbert has never been top 5, I think, in his career in the NFL. But if you told me Justin Herbert in 2 years is going to be a top 5 quarterback, I wouldn't be surprised by that. Jaden Daniels, same way. Drake May. If you tell me Drake May is going to be a top 5 quarterback, I wouldn't disagree with that because Drake May is playing his ass off and looks like a franchise quarterback. So you tell me, what is the line of demarcation when it comes to how long we have to wait for Cam to be a top 5 quarterback? And then, fine. Jude says the Dolphins have to be benching Tua just to see what Ewers can do for an evaluation if they need to draft or sign a quarterback. Here's what I think the Dolphins are going to do. The Dolphins have realized that they're stuck with Tua for next year. So how do you manage that? You manage it by playing a quarterback on a rookie contract. So if you're Miami, you play Ewers, and if Ewers shows you anything, like Levis showed the Titans in 2023, then you just say, well, Ewers is our guy, because you're still going to pay Tua $56 million next year, and nobody is taking that off your hands. That said, I don't think that the Dolphins really look at Quinn Ewers as the future of their franchise. I think the Dolphins know we're fucked. I think they know we shouldn't have signed him to that contract. We got out over our skis. We signed Tua to the contract, and now we're stuck with him for one more year. That's it. Sanchez said, I just heard Cowherd say that the Titans are a political mess. Let me tell you something about this program. So yesterday I asked into the comments section, I said, hey, put what you like about this show compared to the radio show. And we probably need to do something similar where I ask you to put into the comments what you don't like about this show that you miss about the old radio show. But one thing that I decided, and I knew I was going to have to do this before I even left the radio station, but I knew was going to have to happen was in 2025, I was going to have to be more aggressive on social media. That I was going to have to get on TikTok, that I was going to have to utilize YouTube shorts, that I was going to have to just flood the zone and meet people where they are. Now, maybe this is totally independent of the conversation we had yesterday on the program, but I plastered that shit all over social media, and it has picked up. And it's gotten a ton of views. In fact, one of my Tua takes from yesterday has like 100,000 views. It wouldn't surprise me if social media is, Cowherd's on his phone. Somebody saying, oh, hey, look at this story right here about the politics of the Titans. Again, it could have been totally independent, and I could be smelling my own fart on this, but I think that it wouldn't surprise me if that's the way social media works. You're not limited like with the radio, with the signal. You're kind of all out there. And I just didn't have the mental bandwidth doing 4 hours a day, just a performance for 4 hours a day. I did not have the mental bandwidth to be able to do all the social media stuff myself. And the radio station was never going to pay for somebody to actually do social media and do it correctly. So I do think that's kind of a big difference that we have had, for whatever that's worth. Jude, by the way, also says, if Mike Borgonzi interviews Arthur Smith, he should make shaving the mustache a deal breaker. James says, worst stash in the NFL. Let me say this. I hate the Arthur Smith mustache. Again, I don't really give a shit what you look like if you win football games. But I'm like, Arthur, what are you doing to yourself? And it's not that Arthur Smith is a good-looking guy in general. He's not. But it's like, what are you doing to your face, son? You look terrible with that. Though I did tell Lindsay last night, I was like, I think I need a new look. And she was like, what do you mean you need a new look? I was like, I think I need a new look. I think I've had this look for too long. In about 2016, I decided I was going to grow my hair out for a while. I don't know what led to that, but I grew my hair out and I grew a big, big fuzzy beard out. And I just wanted to see what it would look like, and it didn't look very flattering. And the worst part about growing my hair out is that it kind of highlighted the power alleys that I have up here. And so it was showing when my hair was going backwards, it was showing the receding hairline that I had, and we can't have that. And I'm not going to Turkey to get my hair fixed. So we can't do that. And I need to lose more weight in order to go without the beard, because I think I look fatter when I go without the beard. But I need to change my look up somehow, for whatever that's worth. Someone said today on air, Chase said that he'd pay you, Paul, and Retro good money to fly to New England and ask Vrabel questions if he wins the lottery and buys the team. I'll believe Chase and 1025 is paying good money when I see it. That's what I'll believe. I probably shouldn't have said that. Whatever. Okay. I do want to get to Vrabel, though. So I have not been following the Vrabel stuff the way that I normally would follow the Vrabel stuff. I think that's what happens when you have a 1-year-old, is it's just, man, life, there's just more shit going on. But I am stunned as somebody who doesn't cover Mike Vrabel every day anymore, and as somebody who is too busy to listen to Boston radio every day like I used to. I am stunned to hear that apparently there's discussion about, is there an issue between Mike Vrabel and Josh McDaniels? And I heard that and thought to myself, wait a minute. What? Tommy Curran was on WEEI yesterday, and they asked, so is McDaniels going to be back next year? And Tommy Curran, who is very plugged in there, was like, I don't know. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? And all the shows in Boston are, what's up with Vrabel and McDaniels? And so I'm like, where did this come from? Because at halftime on Sunday, I thought, Mike Vrabel is going to the Super Bowl this year, and now it's Vrabel v. McDaniels. So this is what Vrabel said in his weekly interview on Sports Radio WEEI in Boston that led to a lot of people wondering if there was an issue between Vrabel and his offensive coordinator. Take a look.
going back out there and being able to operate and function, I think is pretty impressive.
Wiggs is next.
No, not even close. Not even close. There's not enough pulling and tugging in the world that's going to get me open.
Trainer.
Josh McDaniels said this week he looks forward to being here for a while and building this thing with you. How important is he to the success that you've had this season?
Well, not only Josh, it's the entire football coaching staff and the support staff, and Josh has been a large part of that. And it's been good. I think he's enjoyed it. I think that every team or staff that you're on is a little different. It's got a little different feel to it. It's got different coaches to it, and there's a lot of new faces here for him. And I think that's been good. I don't want to speak for him, but I think I hope he's enjoyed being here and coaching here, and getting us started and 12 games in, or however many games in. What is it? 14 games, and so yeah. But it's been great. Been great to work with him. Excited to see the growth and the continued development of Drake and everybody else. So that's all. I try to put a good staff together that can support each other, challenge each other, and then also, most importantly, help the players.
I heard that and I thought, okay, as somebody who would like to consider themselves an expert in Vrabelese, that wasn't as passive aggressive as I was expecting. But it's pretty on target with what I know about Mike Vrabel and what we know. Again, asked what is a softball question. The Patriots are crushing it on offense this year. Drake May was an MVP candidate until halftime the other day. Hey, what do you think about the success in Josh McDaniels? How hard is it for Vrabel to say Josh has been great? The fact of what we've seen with the development of Drake and integrating the players and the relationship that he has with the players and the knowledge base with which Josh has. He is a Super Bowl winning coordinator, and we are so lucky to have him. Vrabel didn't do that. It was, Mike, what do you think of the coaching staff? Or excuse me, Mike, what do you think of Josh McDaniels? His response, well, it's the whole coaching staff. And I think Josh is doing great, but I am trying to put together a staff where we coach well and challenge each other, and my staff, my team, my guy, my everything. The Patriots are 6th in the NFL in total offense. Yeah, I'd say they've improved a little bit at offensive coordinator. Again, I know Mike Vrabel. And here's the truth when it comes to Vrabel. Because as somebody on the outside now looking in, I think it would be ridiculous for Mike Vrabel not to want to keep Josh McDaniels as his offensive coordinator, giving the success that they're having. And yet, I don't think Tommy Curran is throwing out the hypothetical of Vrabel could move on from McDaniels if he wasn't hearing about some tension between the two. The reality is, the only thing, in my opinion, that's going to keep Mike Vrabel and Drake May and Josh McDaniels from winning the Super Bowl at some point over the next 5 years is Mike Vrabel's ego. And Josh McDaniels is the epitome of the downside of the great Mike Vrabel. When Vrabel was asked directly about McDaniels, and he pivoted to the whole coaching staff, it reminded me of Will Levis's first game against the Falcons, when Levis threw for 4 touchdowns and was bombing the ball down the field, and everybody was excited. And after the game, Vrabel at the podium, no, it was about my guy, Tim Kelly. My guy, Tim Kelly. That was who is responsible for the success that Will Levis had. I know Vrabelese, and I know Mike Vrabel. And I assume that Mike Vrabel is just itching to get Josh McDaniels out of there to put in one of his loser buddies like Todd Downing or Tim Kelly. I can feel it. And you can call me a hater or whatever you want to call me. I can sense it. As an outside observer, it would just be so Mike Vrabel to ruin such a good thing. Josh McDaniels is a Super Bowl winning offensive coordinator who got Mac Jones to the Pro Bowl as a rookie. Josh McDaniels has almost zero shot at getting another head coaching job in the NFL. And they have the 23-year-old second coming of Aaron Rodgers without the baggage and drama at quarterback. And Vrabel can't be happy about it? Vrabel can't just look at his team and say, wow, I've got an experienced Super Bowl winning offensive coordinator who has taken the third pick in the draft, and we have the 6th ranked offense in the NFL, and we are 6th in passing yards, even though we're 26th in attempts, which is incredible from an efficiency standpoint. We don't turn the ball over very much. We just had a 20-point lead on Buffalo at halftime. Things are going great. We're going to make the playoffs in year 1. Everybody's tugging the rope in the same direction. How great is my life? Next year, Drake May will be a year older and a year more experienced, and he and Josh will be tied at the hip. How great will that be? Nope. Vrabel sitting there saying, man, if I could just get McDaniels out of here so I can bring in Todd Downing. It's so Mike Vrabel. It's like the Dean Pease stuff, where Dean Pease was the defensive coordinator, and Dean Pease was a good defensive coordinator, and they got to the AFC Championship game, and then all of a sudden, Dean Pease up and retires. And then we find out, yeah, actually not. As soon as Arthur Smith got a job, Dean unretired. And then Wesley Woodyard says, oh, no. Before the AFC Championship game, Vrabel walked in and said, I'm taking over the defense, and that pissed off Dean Pease. So Vrabel. Vrabel puts in Shane Bowen to be the defensive coordinator. It's a disaster. And instead of firing him, he promotes him because it's his guy. Kelly, Downing, his guys. This is the problem with Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel is a very, very good coach. But this is the stuff that Mike Vrabel does that holds Mike Vrabel back. And again, you may say, well, he didn't take any shots at Josh McDaniels when he said it's about the whole coaching staff. But think about it. When Vrabel loves somebody, he doesn't hesitate to praise them. Remember Aaron Brewer, tougher than a $2 steak? It wasn't, well, let me talk about the whole offensive line. No. It was, let me compliment my guy, Aaron Brewer. So I think it's crazy that Mike Vrabel would even think about touching the offense. If I was Mike Vrabel, I'd be going to Robert Kraft and I'd be saying, what do we have to do to make sure Josh is happy? Because Josh is a big part of Drake May's development. And if I was Robert Kraft, I'd tell Mike Vrabel, hey, do you have an issue with Josh? And if Vrabel said yes, I'd say, well, you need to go ahead and figure that out yourself because Josh is going to be the offensive coordinator next year. If I was a Patriot fan and somebody told me Vrabel was considering replacing McDaniels as the offensive coordinator, I think I'd have to start a protest. Because that's how detrimental getting rid of McDaniels for Downing would be. See, we know this. We as Titan fans, we've experienced Todd Downing. And so we know that if Vrabel were to get rid of Josh McDaniels, again, 23-year-old quarterback, 6th ranked offense in the NFL, if Vrabel were to get rid of Josh McDaniels for Todd Downing, we know that would end in a total disaster. And we know that Vrabel would only be doing it out of his own ego. But I'd also like to think that we all know that ego issue of not my coach versus my coach is the exact kind of trap Mike Vrabel's going to fall into. We know it. Again, let me ask you guys, they have the 6th ranked offense in the NFL. Does this surprise you whatsoever? It should, because it's absurd, but I don't think it does. And then finally, boy, Chad Withrow's mad at me, and so are all those Tennessee fans. So on Saturday, when Diego Pavia finished 2nd for the Heisman Trophy, and I thought Diego Pavia should have won, when Diego Pavia finished 2nd for the Heisman Trophy, I tweeted out and said, now Vanderbilt fans know how Tennessee fans felt when Peyton Manning lost the Heisman Trophy to Charles Woodson. And I knew that was going to piss off Tennessee fans, and that's kind of why I said it, but I do believe it. Chad Withrow, though, not very happy. This was on Hot Mic on Outkick. This is what Withrow had to say about my Diego Pavia Peyton Manning comparison. Take a look.
In no universe is Diego Pavia losing the Heisman to Fernando Mendoza any way comparable to Peyton Manning losing the Heisman at the end of the 97 season. Peyton Manning threw for 3,850 yards and 32 touchdowns. He held 42 NCAA records when he left college football. He lost to a dude who played all three levels, offense, special teams, defense, who scored 4 total touchdowns. This would be the equivalent of Diego Pavia having Peyton Manning's career and season and losing to Jacob Rodriguez of Texas Tech on the Heisman vote. This is not comparable at all. No, Vandy fans do not know what it felt like to be a Tennessee fan in 1997.
Okay, let me just say this. I'm not backing down from that take. I knew Tennessee fans would get all worked up when I said it, and that's partly why I said it. Now, the reason they get all worked up, and this is really with all things in life, not just Tennessee fans, you get worked up when there's a hint of truth in there, and that the truth hurts, and you know that. And here is the truth. Peyton Manning is the greatest player in the history of the University of Tennessee football program. Peyton Manning never won a national title. Peyton Manning never played for a national title. And Peyton Manning finished second in the Heisman voting, and Tennessee fans felt that Peyton Manning got robbed. That's what happened. Now, Peyton Manning's had a great NFL career, and he won 2 Super Bowls, and he's a Hall of Famer. But again, I'm talking about 1997 Tennessee. Manning's the greatest player in UT history. Finished second in the Heisman, didn't win the national title. Diego Pavia is the greatest player to ever play at Vanderbilt University. He never won a national title. He never played for a national title. He finished second in the Heisman voting. And Vanderbilt fans thought Diego Pavia should have won the title because they felt like he was more impactful to Vanderbilt being 10-2 in the SEC than Fernando Mendoza was for Indiana to be 13-0 in the Big Ten. And that might be right. Again, I don't know. But it is absolutely the case that these two situations are similar. And Tennessee fans don't want to admit that because it would hurt them to think that that trash Diego Pavia with his brothers getting arrested and his mom twerking on camera is anything like the great Peyton Manning, who is a saint. And if you want to compare each and every stat, fine, whatever. I'm just telling you. Vanderbilt fans thought Diego Pavia should have won the Heisman Trophy, and he didn't. Just like Tennessee fans thought Peyton Manning should have won the Heisman, and he didn't. Again, if you're dating somebody who's a 10, and I'm dating somebody who's a 5, and my 5 dumps me, and I'm heartbroken about it, and your 10 dumps you, and you're heartbroken about it, you don't get to say, well, I'm more heartbroken over it because my girl was hotter. That's not how it works. Again, we've all had heartbreak in our life. I guarantee you that Tom Brady's heartbreak with Gisele Bündchen didn't hurt necessarily harder than yours did. I just love the fact that Tennessee fans get all up in arms about it because it's like, how dare you compare that Diego Pavia to Peyton Manning? Dude, Diego Pavia just went into Knoxville and won by 21 points. Maybe give him a little bit of credit. And finally, congratulations to Nick Saban buying an ownership stake in the Nashville Predators. I know there was some other guy that also bought a stake in it. I don't know who that is, and I don't care. There are a bunch of people that own the Nashville Predators, so I don't know what percentage Saban bought in for, how much money he spent, and I don't know how involved Nick Saban is going to be. But I will say this. It's always a nice feather in your cap to be on the board of directors for a prestigious nonprofit, and it's always nice to say you own a team. I don't know how involved Saban is going to be. And this may not be fair because I don't know how much hockey Nick Saban knows or doesn't know. But when I was thinking about Nick Saban's impact on the Predators, it made me think about Floyd. Because I remember working with Floyd, who was a 100% football guy, who knew nothing about hockey, and used to have Ryan Porth write out questions for him whenever we'd have Terry Crisp on the radio show. And then I remember a year into doing this with Floyd, when we talked at length about the Predators every single day as they made it to the Stanley Cup final. And unlike the people at 104.5 that didn't know anything about hockey and just talked about catfish on the ice, we were actually talking about defense pairings. We were talking about line changes. We were talking about Laviolette's strategy against the Anaheim Ducks. And I always got a kick out of it because here's Floyd, a football guy, talking hockey for 4 hours a day. The next year in 2018, the Preds were the hottest thing in town. You couldn't get a ticket. And we talked 4 hours of Preds every day because the information we had about the ratings at the radio station said hockey, hockey, hockey. Don't talk basketball. You start talking college basketball, it goes down. Hockey, hockey, football, football, hockey, hockey. And so that's what we did. And I'll never forget it because here's the old man just talking hockey. And yeah, he wasn't Scotty Bowman out there breaking it down. And he would say things like home field ice, which I always got a kick out of. Sometimes he'd call the puck a ball. But he knew enough after the first year to, I think, have really valid opinions about the league and the team. And at the end, I thought it was amazing how spot on some of his opinions were about the hockey team, about things David Poyle was saying, about the coaching situation. I'll never forget after they got beat by Arizona in the bubble series, and the old man said, look, we can keep talking about 2017, but I'm just convinced that was a once-in-a-lifetime thing where the Predators played really, really well and got really, really lucky, and to bank on that happening again, it's just not likely. He became a very insightful voice, I think, in town for hockey. And so when I think of Saban running part of the Predators or being involved in the hierarchy of the Predators, I think there's real value there. It's not going to be right away. But if Saban really invests in caring about the Predators the same way Floyd did, then I think the Predators are going to have somebody that knows what they're doing when it comes to how sports teams should be constructed. And I'll just say this. Floyd, when he got sick, he went dark on everybody. He just stopped talking to people. He just stopped answering text messages. The only person that talked to him, two people talked to him. Les Steckel showed up at his house and talked to him. And Amy Adams Strunk arranged a call with Sally to tell him that he was going into the Titans Ring of Honor. That's it. He completely shut off. And I will never forget. I'll never forget when Katie, his daughter-in-law, told me when he was sick and the Predators were playing Carolina in the playoffs that, oh, yeah, we're going over there tonight to watch the hockey game. And I thought, man, when we started doing this, he would openly complain, not on the radio, but by, oh, God, I can't watch these regular season games. Remember, get me to the playoffs, baby. And there were times where I'd be like, did you watch a hockey game last night? I'd be like, no. Like if there was a Thursday Preds game and there was Thursday night football on, I mean, he wasn't going to watch the Thursday. Come on now. And when I found out that he was sick and still scheduling his day around watching the hockey game, it made me cry. Because it's like at the end of the day, that dude was still committed to the team. That dude got behind it. He would never want to admit it, but he got so into it. I used to love the conversations he and Terry Crisp would have off the air when we had Terry Crisp on every Thursday. And it was just like two old pawpaws just telling war stories. And so with Saban taking ownership of the Predators or a certain percentage or whatever it's going to be, I know that I watched Floyd learn the game. I watched Floyd learn how the NHL is different from the NFL. I watched Floyd learn kind of the personalities of hockey and the comparisons that are apt and those that are not. And by the end of it, he was as bright as anybody in this town when it came to talking about the Predators. I think Nick Saban can do the same thing. That's it for us. We are out of here today. Great show. We've got something cooking tonight that may be a big part of Friday's show, which I'm very excited about. That's it for us. We are out of here. Stillman & Company. We will see everybody live tomorrow right here at 2 o'clock.